Talking about it on SHEABABYTV.
Know the vibes. Make sure you go like and subscribe to the channel if you like what's going on, if you like all the hip-hop and the sports news, and you like everything that Shay Baby's bringing to the table. Make sure you like and subscribe. You already know the vibes. The Diddy trial is in effect. All right, let's see. Look at your man. Look at your man. Your man said he want to come home this month.
Shay Baby.
I don't know, man. I think it's gonna be tough, man. Diddy, you know, they want this. They want this man, dogs. They want him. They want him. They want Diddy, B.
Yeah, Shay Baby.
They want him. All right, let's see what's going on out there. Let's start off with her.
We turn now to a major case that has dominated the headlines for months now. Jury selection in the trial of Sean Diddy Combs begins tomorrow. And I did want to give you just a little bit of a background on this, as the trial will start tomorrow, beginning with jury selection at a federal courthouse in Manhattan. Testimony will likely start the following week. The three-time Grammy winner was indicted last September and has been since held in a federal jail in Brooklyn after judges ruled that he would be a threat to intimidate witnesses and victims if released. The 17-page indictment against Combs accuses him of using employees of his business endeavors, including record labels, a recording studio, an apparel line, an alcoholic spirits company, a marketing agency, a media company, and television network to facilitate his crimes through acts that included kidnapping, arson, and bribery. If convicted on all charges, which include racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transporting people across state lines to engage in prostitution, Combs faces a possible sentence of decades in prison. I do want to bring in criminal attorney Eric Faddis to speak more on this. And Eric, I appreciate you joining us here on Live Now from Fox.
Be with you, Stephanie.
So this case is going to have a lot of bombshell testimony, no doubt. But I want to start with jury selection that's expected to begin tomorrow. When it comes to what an ideal juror is for the defense and for the prosecution, what are each side looking for a juror?
Yeah, Stephanie, I think the defense is going to look for people who are open to non-traditional lifestyles, who can receive evidence of what defense will sort of style as sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and not get put off and not rush to judgment. On the flip side, the prosecution is going to be looking for folks who are not going to be distracted by, you know, the new shiny object over here, who are not going to get off course by any kind of circus the Diddy team may try to bring into this trial.
So, I mean, this has garnered much media attention. How does that factor in when it comes to selecting a jury? Because no doubt most people have heard of what is going on.
Totally. So it presents a significant problem. Here's the thing. The judge wants to find jurors who are fair and impartial and who have not already developed an opinion as to Diddy's guilt or innocence. Well, that's hard when every media outlet in the world has covered this case. They've likely already heard about it. And so what the judge is going to have to do is determine how much exposure the potential jurors have had to this Diddy saga, and whether they can put that aside and simply base their verdict on what happens inside that courtroom and not everything that has gone on preceding that.
I also
Leah, what's goody, Leah?
You know, one of Combs' attorneys, and you mentioned your lifestyle of the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You know, one of Combs' attorneys had mentioned,
shout out to Leah's cute ass.
Is not perfect, but everything that was done, was involving consensual adults. There are, you know, there's a lot of evidence, particularly the one with the videotape of Sean Diddy Combs and his then girlfriend, Cassie, showing that he was punching, kicking, and then dragging her inside an LA hotel. How significant is that piece of evidence? The Combs attorneys, they didn't want this to be included. A judge ruled that it could be. So how pivotal is this particular piece of evidence?
The video of the Cassie Ventura assault can't be underestimated. So it's clearly inflammatory. Anyone who watches it, it evokes a feeling of, oh my gosh, I feel bad for this person. When we talk about the legal relevance of it, I think it goes more towards the RICO charge and less towards the sex trafficking charge, to show that Diddy engages in violence and threats of violence to silence people, to get his way. But of course, prosecutors will try to weave that video into the sex trafficking charges, as Cassie Ventura is listed as victim number one in the sex trafficking count.
So let's talk about those charges, because obviously the prosecutors have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt some of these charges. You know, what do they have to present to actually indict Combs? Because a lot of this, you know, is perhaps bad behavior, and no doubt his defense team is going to paint it as such. But how does it rise to the level of, let's say, racketeering and all these other charges?
Sure. So the first charge is racketeering. That is a law that was really developed to go after mafioso types, to go after crime families. Here, that they're saying that Bad Boy Entertainment was a criminal enterprise and that Diddy engaged in multiple acts of predicate offenses. Those are listed as arson, bribery, kidnapping, that kind of thing. And that all of that was done in relation to and perhaps in furtherance of that criminal enterprise. Second, they are charging 2 counts of human or sex trafficking by fraud, force, or coercion. That's essentially that a commercial sex act was committed by fraud, force, or coercion. The prosecution is going to talk about drug injection. Lastly, they're charging interstate, essentially like an interstate act where Diddy's team recruited a commercial sex worker, helped them transport that person across state lines for a commercial sex act. And so those are really the basics of the elements that the prosecution is going to seek to prove at trial.
You know, we're going to hear from many witnesses, you know, taking the stand. When you take a look at the scope of this trial, with jury selection beginning tomorrow and then likely testimony the following week, how long do you think that this trial is going to last?
I think some of the estimates that I've seen seem on the low end. I think this is going for weeks, if not months. This is a very involved indictment. It includes alleged offenses that span almost 2 decades, and there are going to be multiple witnesses and law enforcement investigators and everything under the sun. The jury's going to hear about all of that, and then the defense also has a chance to put on their case. They're going to put on their witnesses and try to establish that, hey, these acts, although they might be unsavory in some folks' eyes, they were not non-consensual, and because of that, they were not criminal acts.
You know, there's been also a lot of discussion about whether Sean Diddy Combs himself will take the stand. You know, defense teams often shy away from that, even if, someone is very keen on, sharing their perspective, their truth. Do you think that's going to happen, or do you think that he is not going to take the stand?
Yikes, I would absolutely advise him not to take the
stand.
That's
a fact, Charles.
Because there's so much impeachment material that he would be confronted with while on the stand. Look at the Cassie video in and of itself. The prosecutor would walk through that in painstaking detail and say, hey, is this you, kicking your girlfriend in the stomach while she's on the ground? Is this you dragging her by her hair? Don't you understand that that could cause pain to somebody or cause them to be intimidated? Was that part of your design all along? All of these questions could be damning for Diddy, and I doubt that he would take the stand.
From your perspective as a criminal attorney, as we see this trial unfold, are you keeping a very close eye on anything in particular, whether it be certain witnesses, whether it be certain pieces of evidence? What are you really focusing on?
One thing that's really going to matter, I think, is how Cassie Ventura, victim 1, presents on the stand. She is a superstar, and she has alleged that she was sex trafficked and also physically assaulted and everything else. If she could convey the emotional reality of what she says happened to the jury, make them feel what she felt in those moments, that is going to go a long way. On the other hand, if she comes off as kind of a disgruntled and jilted former ex-lover who has an axe to grind against Diddy, that is going to score points for the defense. And so really her testimony is going to be key in this trial.
So, do you expect her to be the first witness called to the stand, or do you think that they're going to save that testimony to the very end?
I'm not sure that they want to just play their entire hand right out of the gate. I think you sort of build up to it. You set the stage. You probably have some law enforcement witnesses who will talk about what Bad Boy Entertainment is, the investigation into the activities of that organization, and how that sort of gave rise to Diddy's feeling powerful and like he's untouchable, and then go into the specific acts that are alleged against Diddy with respect to sex trafficking, physical abuse, and that kind of thing.
Eric, it's going to be very interesting to see what comes of it. This is out of a New York City courtroom, so no cameras allowed inside. But oftentimes we do get some of those photos prior to them closing the doors to the media. It's going to be very interesting to see what comes out of it. And no doubt, Eric, we're going to be speaking with you again. But we appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Good to be with you.
Crazy. So that's just what's going on out there with your man Diddy. So Diddy, you can see that, he not taking no pleas, man. Diddy's taking this all the way to the end. That could be life for him if he loses this.
Yeah,
it could be over for Diddy if he loses this. That's a fact. Diddy, he feels he could win this. I mean, he ain't got no choice, my dude. Doing 20 years is crazy. Check out his son when his son came to the court. Him and the daughters went out there mad. It's crazy out there. Nasty. All right, here goes some more smoke with your man Diddy.
Again, viewer discretion is advised here as jury selection is set to begin tomorrow in the sex trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs, with testimony slated to start the following week. The music mogul faces an indictment that includes descriptions of quote-unquote freak-offs described as alleged drugged-up orgies where women were forced to have sex with men while Diddy filmed them.
Wow.
Prosecutors say witnesses have come forward accusing the entertainer of terrorizing people into silence by choking, hitting, kicking, and dragging them, often by the hair, even dangling someone from a balcony at one point. The defense arguing it was consensual sexual activity, while Diddy does acknowledge one episode of violence, the caught-on-camera beating of his former girlfriend, singer Cassie. Again, viewer discretion advised here as we discuss this further. I do want to bring in Nima Rahmani, former federal prosecutor and current president here of West Coast Trial Lawyers. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Thanks for having me, Josh. Always great to be on.
Of course. And first off, I do want to ask you, can you break down the charges that Diddy does face and really what the prosecution here has to prove?
Josh, there are three sets of charges. The least serious are the prostitution charges, and everyone knows what that is. That's the exchange of sex for something of value, usually money. And there has to be an interstate component. And here, some of these women were crossing state lines. Then you have the sex trafficking charges. And what separates sex trafficking from consensual sex, and we know that adults can consent to sex, no matter how freaky it is one of three things: force, fraud, or coercion. And in this particular case, the government is alleging force and coercion. Force speaks for itself. Diddy himself, his security, all the weapons that were confiscated. And then that coercion, that's that drug element. The victims here are alleging that they were drugged and forced to participate in these freak-offs, these orgies, over the course of days. Then you have the racketeering charge. And when you think of racketeering, usually you think of the mob, right? The cartel, some street gang. But racketeering is really any criminal enterprise, and that can be a loose association of two or more people that commit two or more racketeering acts. And here, the enterprise is Diddy and his entourage, similar to R. Kelly's entourage, for instance. And the RICO predicate acts are the sex trafficking, the violence, the forced labor. So those are generally the three sets of charges that comprise this indictment.
One thing I want to pop up here on your screen, it's a video that has been seen time and time again, circulated all over the internet. How might this hotel video showing Diddy assaulting Cassie affect the jury? He has admitted that, this is something that did happen. It's caught on video. So how could it impact the jury overall?
Josh, this video is highly impactful because video doesn't lie. We can all see with our own eyes Diddy beating Cassie Ventura at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles. And let me just tell you how powerful this video is. Even after Cassie filed her lawsuit in November 2023 and Diddy settled it the next day, he denied the allegations. Even after his homes in Los Angeles and Miami were raided in March of last year, Diddy continued to deny the allegations. Only in May of last year, when CNN got a copy of this video and released it, did Diddy finally issue some sort of apology. I think the video is going to be the best evidence in this case. And if you believe Cassie Ventura, and I do, Diddy taped many of these freak-offs, both for his own sexual pleasure and maybe to maintain control over some of the other participants. And to the extent that those videos are played, I think it's going to be very damning evidence for the defense.
And I have to ask, when you talk about the defense overall, what is their defense? I know that there's been obviously different hearings that have been held. The defense has spoken to members of the media. What is their defense overall here?
Josh, their defense is going to be the following. This happened, but it was consensual. And whenever you're dealing with a sexual assault case, usually the defense will fall into one of two categories. I didn't do it, there was no sexual activity, or I did and it was consensual. And because we're not dealing with minors here, the defense is going to argue consent. And really, they're going to argue that the victims here, they're lying. And they're lying for one of three reasons, or maybe all of them. Money. And many of them have filed civil lawsuits. Cassie's, of course, has settled for an 8-figure sum, 10 million or more. Then you have maybe victims who are seeking fame because of Diddy's power and influence in the entertainment industry. And last, maybe revenge. And, oftentimes defendants will argue that this is a disgruntled ex that has an axe to grind. So this case will indeed be based entirely on cross-examination of the victims. So the government, of course, will want to corroborate their testimony. Some of these allegations were made many years later. The civil lawsuits certainly don't help because it creates at least the argument that this is about money and there's a potential motivation to lie or fabricate the evidence. So the government's going to want video. They're going to want independent witnesses. Obviously, members of Diddy's entourage help procure these women, set up the freak-offs, get the hotel rooms, set up the lights and cameras. So to the extent that you have video, you have individuals that corroborate this victim testimony, I think that's going to be helpful for the Department of Justice in this case.
As far as the defense here, we are going to see the jury selection take place tomorrow. Testimony expected to get underway here in about a week or so. So the following week after jury selection, what are the sides looking for when you talk about a possible jury pool here? It's unlikely that people haven't necessarily heard about this case or at least know who Diddy is. So what
John Coop was goody.
Defense, what are they looking for?
Prosecution and defense, they're looking for favorable jurors. And like you said, Josh, everyone in the entire world has
JC, what's poppin'?
No place in the country, maybe in the world, can move this trial to. It is indeed the trial of the century, or certainly the biggest trial since maybe Johnny Depp, maybe even going back to OJ. So what the defense is looking for, they're looking for favorable jurors. And what are favorable jurors? These are jurors that are skeptical of these types of allegations. Maybe people that think Me Too has gone too far. Maybe jurors who think that, well, women or men who put themselves in this situation can't later argue rape. This is really regret more than anything. Of course, the government is going to want to exclude those types of jurors, as well as any jurors that are potential fans of Diddy, because we know that celebrities tend to do better at criminal trials and even civil ones than ordinary folks. So any fans, the prosecution is going to want to get them off.
Haas Dougie was goody.
People that might want to get on this case, write a book about it when it's all said and done. So I think both sides are going to have their jury consultants, and they're going to use their intuition to remove any of these types of jurors. We have about 600 of them coming into the potential panel. They'll be stricken one by one, and the 12 that remain are going to be the 12 jurors in this case.
As you mentioned here, this is a high-profile case. There's a lot of celebrities who have been named, involved in some way. So I have to ask, because I know we don't necessarily know for sure if Diddy will testify. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that he will take the stand?
I do not think he will. I think it's far too risky for the defense to put him on the stand. Now, there have been some rumors on social media that he will. And if he does, the entire case is going to come down to his testimony, which is typical when a defendant takes the stand. I think the defense is going to focus on undermining the credibility of the victims in this case.
Crazy. Yeah, I don't think Diddy want to take the stand because, like he said, there's too many people that, you know, they're going to be, like Cassie destroyed him. If you take Cassie out of this, Diddy got a fair shot. It's hard for Diddy, the people to look at Diddy and they see that tape, bro. I'm telling you. Because even though they got to prove him with the sex tapes, the baby oil, all of the drugging up and all of the taping, it's like you want him to be guilty when you think about the tape. That's what they're saying. It's hard to take the stand when the tape makes him look bad. You know, like Menace Society, stop showing the tape.
Yeah, SHEABABYTV.
Yeah, he said if Diddy take the stand, he going the Nino Brown route. Yeah, if Diddy take the stand, he definitely going the Nino Brown route. I agree. I can see Diddy up there like Nino Brown too.
Yeah,
that's a fact.
SHEABABYTV.
Yo, shout out to Charles. That's a fact. Yeah, he definitely going the Nino route. He ain't got no he ain't got no choice. He ain't got no choice at that point, man.
Yeah,
Yo, Charles, tomorrow, I'm gonna make a reel and a clip of the Nino Brown so they can see it. That's a fact.
Yeah.
So it's safe to say, Diddy on the stand, turning to Nino Brown, facts.
Yeah, SHEABABYTV.
Word. Charles, you wild for that one, cuz.
To jury selection in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. Combs will be present in a New York court this morning as he faces multiple charges, including racketeering and sex trafficking. Chief investigative correspondent Aaron Katursky is there at the court for us. Good morning, Aaron.
And
Ryan Clifton, what's goody?
Famous faces have appeared in this courthouse, but never before has such a cultural force stood trial. And moments from now, they're going to begin picking a jury of ordinary citizens to sit in judgment of a chart-topping rapper and music impresario. This morning, jury selection begins in the most anticipated trial of the year, the racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking trial of Sean Combs. Known by various names through the years, Puffy, Puff Daddy, Diddy, Combs became one of music's most influential figures.
Can't nobody hold me down.
Oh no! Keep on moving!
But federal prosecutors are now out to prove he used his power, wealth, and fame to force women into prolonged, drug-fueled orgies he called freak-offs, and then threaten them into silence.
This office is determined to investigate and prosecute anyone who engages in sex trafficking, no matter how powerful or wealthy or famous you may be.
Combs rejected a last-minute offer to plead guilty. His attorneys are out to convince the jury the government is trying to police consensual sex by a swinger who they say invited third parties into his bedroom.
The prosecution in this case are going to be looking at attitudes or experiences towards government and prosecutors. If they believe that, prosecutors unfairly targeted
Ryan Clifton, good looks, my boy.
The defense side.
Appreciate you. Hit that like button too, my boy.
Sexual preferences. Hip-hop lifestyle.
Prospective jurors have already answered written questions about their knowledge of Combs, their ability to be fair, and their tolerance for a 2-month trial with explicit evidence. That includes video obtained by CNN showing Combs chasing then-girlfriend Cassie Ventura down a hotel hallway in 2016, knocking her down and kicking her. Combs later issuing an apology video.
I mean, I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable.
Combs has appeared thinner than when he was first arrested back in September, his hair grayer. Jury selection could take about 3 days, and then, guys, opening statements are scheduled 1 week from today. Guys.
Okay, Aaron, thanks very much. Our chief legal analyst, Dan Abrams, is here. How tough is it going to be to pick a jury here?
They'll be able to find a jury. I mean, look, they've got a lot of these questions already being asked in the form of a questionnaire, right? And I find that in a lot of these high-profile cases, you see when you start talking to people, people aren't following the ins and outs of these cases the way certainly I am or we are every day. People know that he's been indicted. They don't know the details of the case. The critical point here in jury selection is going to be trying to avoid the wrong jurors, right? It's not about, oh, we're going to find a jury that's all going to be really helpful to our side. Each side is trying to make sure they don't pick particularly bad jurors. It'll take a little longer than a typical case, but they'll be able to find a jury.
All excellent points there. How strong is the prosecution's case, and what could possibly be the defense's strategy?
So it's going to come down to the quality of the witnesses that they call, meaning how persuasive are these accusers? Remember, these are people who also filed civil lawsuits against him. So we don't know yet. This is not an easy case for prosecutors, that's for sure, because as a legal matter, they're going to have to show that this was coercion,